Okay, hello everyone. Once again, we are back with the Down the Pub podcast brought to you by Wolves of Westminster and hosted by me, Peter Simpson, contributor to Wolves of Westminster, and obviously I also run the Haryan Gláeddyv channel, which is where most of you will be watching this, to be fair. And I am joined today just by Patrick, as we couldn't get Simon with his network issues, so we've got the editor with us today. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, sir, and how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. It's been an eventful couple of weeks, and then obviously tonight we've got Caephilly, the election there. I don't think I'll be
Mm.
staying up for that. I think it'll be a bit like Runcorn, where I'll probably tap out about 1 a.m. seeing everyone get
Well,
excited.
it is interesting, isn't it, that one? Because we've got, at the moment, the most recent polling I've seen is that Reform is on 42%, Plaid, the main challenger, is on 38%. So it
Mm.
could actually be closer than some people think, but we
Yeah,
just don't know. So we have that going on.
yeah, it is an interesting one. I mean, I don't know anyone personally there. I know a few people from my neck of the woods in North Wales have actually travelled down a couple of times to door knock and leaflet, help the campaign and all that. Not talk to them properly, but there's someone I know through Twitter who's there, and his ongoing commentary on the campaign there is it's all very high energy. It's all very good. It all sounds very Runcorn, effectively. So that does put my spirits up, but I know what you mean. It could be a case of Labour are told just vote Plaid, which is quite likely because they are. It's basically an open secret that they're working together against reform. And
Well, can I share a
yeah,
personal story on that one from
yeah, yeah.
about 6 years ago? Yeah. So I well, it didn't really work out as such, but I went up to be a candidate for as it was, the artist formerly known as the Brexit Party in 2019. Now, as part of that, when they were recruiting for candidates, one of their key criteria was when you're told to go and campaign somewhere, do it. And they'll be paying attention in recruitment terms to who does and who doesn't. So I went down to do some campaigning and I can't remember where it was now, but it was quite a, it, it was South Wales, so it was a 3 hour drive from me. Um, and the Lib Dems won it in the end, but the point is, you had to go down there and do that.
Hmm.
And obviously Leave Means Leave evolved, whether they like to admit it or not, into the Brexit Party, which then evolved into Reform UK. I can only imagine that there are similar circumstances going on now where you have people who are being, basically press ganged into doing something. If there's somebody who is or is trying to be a prospective parliamentary candidate, I can only imagine that may well be the case because they've done it before.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Well, I mean, the lesson there is obviously go campaign if you're
Yeah.
interested in a position. It's just unfortunately on all the campaign. Well, obviously there's midweek campaign days I couldn't do, but it's 5 hours away from me to actually get to the south. It's
Mm.
because it's either go through a load of windy Welsh roads or go into England, go down a motorway, go back out of England, which is what you have to do with the train as well, which is also 5 hours. In fact, it's probably 6 hours to Caerphilly, that one. So, unfortunately, it wasn't quite an option for me, but our branch chairman, who's the one who went down a couple of times, yeah, he's well, really in it for the cause, quite clearly. I mean, he's been with Nigel Farage since the UKIP days, so he's a long termer.
Well, and I think this really is what they're looking for,
Yeah.
except for when they're not. I mean, if you look at what happened to Gwaine Towler, for example, he was a long termer, and yeah, well, that didn't work out. So in the end, we see these twists and turns in the political cycle of who's in favour and who is not. But really, it's not so much for us to comment on. There has, of course, been some other quite interesting stuff this week. We've seen the Labour government's scheme for the one in, one out for returning migrants. We've seen this unravel.
Yes.
This week, we see it reported on the BBC and on Sky and The Guardian, actually, that somebody who was returned on the one in, one out scheme has now returned to the UK shores on a small boat, of all things. Yeah, there we go. Oh,
Yeah.
it's called the old Faithful, isn't it? Really,
Well,
try that one
just
because that seems to work.
just imagine my
But it's a,
shock. It's
I know.
I in every video I've done covering this, frankly, disaster of a policy. The main question I've asked is what actually stops them from coming back over, and we have the answer
Mm,
now. At the moment, at least, nothing. So,
well,
and
quite so.
yeah, and this is a person that we know has not been vetted. Now the question is, does he get to try again with his appeal, or will he just get sent back over? I don't know. Will there be another
Well,
case of more journalists are on a plane than migrants who should be sent back?
well,
Yeah,
the big question to consider here is that because when Labour came in, they scrapped the Rwanda deterrent on day one, which I will give them some credit for in the sense that they said they would do it on day one, and indeed they did.
yeah,
Um, so they did, but they did so on the grounds that this was a gimmick. However, it looks as though they basically replaced one gimmick with another,
mm,
which is now being demonstrably, I think, if not equally useless as Rwanda, even worse.
yeah.
And it's not really fair in the first instance to call Rwanda useless because it was never really properly tried. Whereas this now is being tried, and what we're finding is if you get rid of them, they'll just come back again. Now, I do recall reporting, this was the BBC actually, interviewing people who were, so this is in France, about to embark upon said journey, and they failed there to come back again. And what the interview revealed was that they were saying, "We will keep trying. We will keep trying
Yeah.
and trying and trying. We will keep trying over and over and over again until we get there and we can stay there." I also recall, now this goes back really some years.
Mm.
In fairness, this was before the small boat thing was really a thing.
Hmm.
But I recall from 5 or 6 years ago there was and I'm hopefully without offending anybody, I'll try and do the accent because I'm just, I'm recalling the video. There's this guy who's like, but if you go to England, they will give you a house. They will give that kind of,
Yeah. But
this is the prevailing attitude,
yeah.
and people like to, on the left in particular, like to deny that this is the case, but actually no, they just think that as soon as they get here, they'll be fine.
Well, yeah, the thing they always say is I was watching a leftist YouTuber's, well, I covered it actually, a leftist YouTuber's video the other day. Jimmy the Giant he's called. He's been on the Guardian. He's been on Politics Joe. Even he's quite big really. But he did this whole thing on the Islamization of Britain. So is our culture under attack? And then he started. He covered this video where someone was in the north. I'm not sure where in the north it was. Somewhere in the northeast, in a dilapidated town, interviewing the homeless. And something that was brought up all the time is these migrants get everything and we don't. And the point back is always, oh yeah, but they're only getting 50 quid a week if they're not in a hotel. If they are in a hotel, they get 10 quid a week. And the point back's obvious. What are these homeless people getting though? And this is the whole thing. It's priorities. Like, what's really your priority if you're trying to do a one in one out deal with France, where in the end what
Well,
happens is we take them, send one back, and then they still come over. The answer is France get rid of theirs, and we take them all still. And France are very happy with that, and hopefully the relationship gets better. That seems to be what the Labour plan is, because I've heard no journalist try and defend this. So,
well, can I just come
yeah.
in briefly on the point you make there about
Mm.
the comparison between that and the homeless, be they
Yeah.
British or otherwise, or
Yeah.
you know, there's the people who we all, and we all know we do, walk past
Hmm.
on the street,
Yes.
who are in a sleeping bag, sometimes with an accompanying dog.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're right to say that, actually, yes, those people are getting less
Mm.
than these people who are getting, admittedly not much, but at least something.
I mean,
And one also
yeah.
has
I,
to question,
I'd quite like a hotel and my food made for me, and a tenner a week, to be honest, and free
well,
dental and
yeah,
healthcare that's private sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, you get your pocket money basically, don't you?
Mm.
But I wonder how much pocket money the tramp that we walk past on the street.
Mm.
If you're in London, where I usually am, not at the moment, but where I usually am, I mean, you'll see at least one or two of those a day, just about wherever you go. Well, these people are getting more than those people that we walk past.
Yes.
Okay, so that's worth pointing out, isn't it? But I think really the emphasis here has to be on the fact that this, that the scheme that the previous administration attempted to introduce, flawed as it was, was scrapped on day one as a gimmick. Now we have this thing going on, which cannot really be said to be anything other than a gimmick in itself, and it isn't even working. Miranda wasn't given a chance to work. This we now know definitely isn't. So that's another thing that we can put forward there is to say, well, all right, so this is your version of trying to do that. This story that the BBC has reported on today, is clearly showing that, there aren't, ways within the current system to actually deal with this. Now, with that said, that leads on to the debate. And I thought we might perhaps segue into the recent Tory party conference. Well, now Kemi has finally come out and said, Kemi Badenoch has said, we will leave the ECHR, we will do all of that kind of thing. Her main...
I was going to say, it's a step further than that, isn't it? She's saying that you can only stand as an MP if you support leaving the ECHR, which a lot of the old guard didn't like. Edwina Curry, for example.
It's... I've met her actually a couple of times. She's interesting, but the thing it reminds me of is the 2019 election, when Tory PPCs were told, if you will not, sign up to Brexit, basically, you're not going to get selected. So, in fact, this approach is not actually without precedent.
No.
Yeah. They've done it before. She's basically doing the same thing again. She's saying if she, unusually for her thus far, is making a headline policy, and she's saying this is one of the things that we will definitely campaign on, and if you're not behind it, then GTFO. So, yep.
Get out, okay. For those that don't know.
It's not an approach that's without precedent. But what you find with political leaders, especially new-ish ones, which she is where exactly do they end up nailing their trousers to the mast? And it would seem that this at least gives us more of an indication of Kemi as to where she will nail her trousers to the mast. And we also had this announcement of, we're going to get rid of stamp duty, but not properly, but sort of slightly. Well, not slightly, but, for the lowest end of the market, yes, we will do that. Now, she said that, and that got a rousing, a standing ovation.
Everyone loved that in the conference. I've heard nobody talk about it outside of Tory Twitter, really.
I know what you mean. I mean, mainstream media's reported on it extensively, but see, you think the next one might be inheritance tax?
Yeah, especially, didn't Osborne up inheritance tax?
Pass.
I can't remember.
I think they made several tweaks to it.
Yeah,
I think they made several tweaks to it, but the reality is that it is another one of those. It's a very hated tax. But with Kemi being Kemi, she might sort of think, I'll do this one this year because I think I've got several years. I'll do this one this year, and then next year I'll say I'm going to abolish inheritance tax. I'll do it. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm making no predictions, but I can see that.
I just enjoyed the catty line of she thinks she has more than 1 year, because
I mean,
there's a lot of talk of replacing her, I have to say, but there's a lot of it with Starmer as well. It's
Well, quite so, and actually, that's another very good point to move on to, isn't it? That there is, I can tell you from Labour sources, there is a lot of talk of replacing Starmer. There is a lot of talk of that. In both cases, though, what's interesting, is two things. One, that nobody really thinks they know who to replace them with.
Yeah.
And two, nobody necessarily thinks there's going to be enough of a challenge to actually make it happen. So we end up with this kind of doom loop spiral, that sort of like, well, they just carry on and carry on and carry on until eventually. I mean, this is what happened with Rishi Sunak at the end of the day.
We're in a situation where for both we may as well call them legacy parties at this point, because I can see the Greens overtaking both of them in some polls soon. God forbid. Hopefully the Lib Dems pick it up, but I can't see Ed Davey doing anything crazy. But basically everyone within the party, not everyone, but a lot of people in the party, are almost openly off the record to journalists saying, yeah, they're both terrible, and then when push vote, well, who would you rather have? They don't really. Everyone else is just kind of worse.
Well, the contemporary word these days in political circles now seems to be rudderless, but that word is being ascribed to, as you say, both the Conservatives and Labour. Nobody really knows what's going on. With that said, I am actually a bit more sympathetic than, well, quite a lot of political commentators when it comes to this kind of thing, because I mean, a lot of leaders have taken quite a long time to come into their own.
Well, Margaret Thatcher was hated for about 3 years.
Yes,
and she was very good.
So,
yeah,
and it's worth bearing that in mind about Kemi. It's also worth bearing that in mind, and I sort of hate to say it, but with all due respect, to Sir Keir Starmer as well. He's actually, when people say, because they chucked the line at the Tories, oh, you were in power for 14 years, what did you all that? Well, they've been in power for, somewhere over 14 months now. Okay, but that's months and it's not years. Yeah. So, I will give him the benefit of the doubt in the sense of saying, well, I'm going to use a tired old line that was often repeated on Yes Minister, that Rome wasn't built in a day. Now, Kemi might well say that about her shadow administration, and the Prime Minister might well say that about his actual administration. But it is worth noting that we're also seeing jittering in the bond markets and the gold markets at the moment.
Well, if anything's gonna cause the dominoes to fall, it will be that. I mean, it did Liz Truss in for 49 days. I mean, this is also why I have part of the reason I have no sympathy and no patience is because I did want Liz Truss in for my sins, and everyone within 7 weeks she has to go, even within the party. The men in suits, as they said about Margaret Thatcher. You got to have Jeremy Hunt on, get rid of Kwasi Kwarteng, and it's quite funny as well because the left wing absolutely hated that budget, even though it had the single biggest increase in public spending ever, which just goes to show there was absolutely no point in trying to appease them whatsoever.
No, indeed. Well, her problem was that she didn't, corroborate that with cutting public spending. That was sort of the big deal. That was the big deal. And I knew she was gone. I knew she was gone when she summoned Kwasi Kwarteng back from America to sack him. You sacked your own chancellor for implementing your own agenda. I don't know. Your days are numbered.
Well,
my
that's
dear.
that's part of Starmer's problem, isn't it? Because a lot of people might ask, how is Rachel Reeves still in? Because she's not that impressive. It's like, well, she goes, Starmer goes. She can't.
I mean, I will credit the Labour Party with giving us our first female chancellor. Okay. I mean, well, we've not had that before,
No, but
I only say that because the Conservatives often like to trumpet the whole fact. What have we had? We've had 3 female prime ministers from them.
Yeah.
From 1979 onwards, we've had Thatcher, we've had May, then we've had Truss for all of 7 minutes. Oh, sorry, weeks. But well, there we are. So, and I think for them, it's another one to chalk up to the the achievements list. Hey, we gave you the first female chancellor. Yeah, great. The trouble was that it's one of those. I'll tell you what. It reminds me of a line from Paul Merton. This goes back obviously quite a few years to the Gordon Brown era. and he was on Have I Got News for You, obviously. And he was saying it's such a shame for Gordon. He's finally got the job he always wanted. Now he's found out he can't do it. And when I look at Ms. Reeves, that's kind of the impression that I get. She will point to, look at the legacy I was left with. Yeah, okay, but from a conservative point of view, I mean, you spend ages trying to fix the public finances while also trying to negotiate a withdrawal from your, in the latter half of that period up to 2020, say, withdrawal from one of your most major trading partners and then work out a way of working with them going forward. Then COVID happens, and you end up spaffing 400 billion quid up the wall.
Thank you.
To pay
thank
people,
you, Rishi. Yeah,
so to pay people not to work for a year and a half. Now, exactly how you expected the public finances to be left after that, I've got no idea.
Well, I was going to say, this is the funny thing as well. Labour wanted more. They wanted more money printing. It would have been much worse if they were in.
Well, incredible. I mean, that is arguable. But then you also have the other, sort of like, okay, where do we go from this now? And I can tell you from city sources and other kinds of political activist forces, there's a lot of stuff that just couldn't happen. Things to do with fundraising dinners and that kind of thing that would actually put funds into various causes that couldn't be carried out. And I'm being very generic here for reasons, but okay. So there are a lot of things that COVID, the whole business of it, just kind of kiboshed. Just kind of kiboshed it, and had that not been the case, I think a lot of things about the whole overall state of the nation's finances might have actually turned out to be quite different. But there's no point saying, oh well, you in power for this long and you did. Yeah, okay. The reality is we had a once in a century event, the pandemic, that basically screwed everything up. So no matter who was in power and no matter what you've done over the past whatever period it was, things are going to get screwed up. Now the next lot will come in and say, oh look, it was all their fault. Well, do you know what? It'd been the other way around. I don't think it would have been much different at all.
No. Well, it's like the 2008 crash.
Yeah.
It's I mean, this is what the other thing I've noticed is, especially from centrist dad types, I guess we'll call them. They kind of run out of things to say, and they can't really analyze any of this. And I think it's come down to that their experiment has kind of come to an end, but they really don't want it to stop. Because where can you go from this? Everyone's saying, oh, you have to raise taxes even more, but then Spectator just had Laffer on saying, obviously, because it's Laffer who made the Laffer curve, obviously drop taxes because you can't tax your way to prosperity. But I just listened to How to Win an Election with Hugo Rifkin, Danny Finkelstein, and a Labour and Lib Dem, two ladies from them. But all they can really say is, well, she's obviously got to break a commitment and raise a tax somewhere, one of the big ones. And we're probably going to end up having that, which is just going to make a lot of people want to leave, not just right-wingers, but I've known people that have been planning to move to like Italy for ages. Why? Because there's less tax. Who did they happen to vote for? The party that was going to raise tax.
There we are. So, and so we have the budget in about a month's time now, don't we? So it's if anything, rather than commenting in particular here on either fiscal or monetary policy or taxation policy, I'm simply going to comment on political acumen. And I'm sad to say, the lack thereof in as represented by our current chancellor. She went into a situation not knowing what the actual state of the finances was, although I'll come back to that later because that's less true than it might not otherwise. It might have been, back in 2010, sort of say. She went into this saying, I'm definitely not going to do that. Okay, don't do that. if you're a politician, I mean, don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't sit there and go, oh yeah, I will definitely never ever do this. And it's a point I've made.
You're laying the rakes out to step on them. Yeah.
Well, it's your presumption that nothing's going to change in the period during which you're in office. But with that said, what's your alternative? To say basically nothing, which appears to be the Kemi approach, and until recently.
Yes,
But actually, there is a wisdom to this, and I can't remember I've said this on this show before. I do remember Giles Brandreth on Have I Got News for You. He's a very experienced politician, if nothing else, and like him or hate him, it doesn't matter. And he goes, this is the mistake that politicians make, saying anything at all. And I kind of, I kind of get it, that in terms of what he's actually saying there. What he's saying is, if you're going to say something, only make it. I'm putting words in his mouth here, but it's like only make it something you can definitely commit to. If you can't, then don't try and sell yourself on policy by saying, "Oh, we will never do this," because until you're in power, you actually don't fully know. Now, as I said, I'll come back to the other point, which is, if you go back 15 or 20 years, something like that, really it was the case. If you're in opposition, you're not shown the figures, not properly, by the civil service and that kind of thing, as to what the actual state of the economy is. Now, remember, just very much after the 2010 election, there was the note from Liam Byrne.
Yeah,
it was left on the you know what I mean. Yeah,
they still go on about that in 2018.
And that, of course, is really a political stunt, gimmick, whatever you want to call it, and it's worthwhile calling it out for what it is. But at the same time, that was kind of true back then.
Yeah, but the point now, why did they even leave that note though? That's one thing I can't understand. Like, that's obviously going to be used against you.
I'll answer that in a minute, but the point is, nowadays it is actually a lot easier, even in opposition, to gain access to the information, the data, the whatever, on the actual state of the country's finances, which is why I think for anyone who's actually in Westminster circles and follow this kind of stuff, it just rings very hollow when Rachel Reeves gets into office and says, "Oh, but I didn't know there was a 22 billion black hole." Is that, well, half of it was accounted for by your wanting to
raise the public the public service,
bonds to trade unions. But even if you ignore that, we didn't know how bad things were. Well, actually, you could have done, and you probably did, but you'd like everyone to pretend that you didn't. In just the same way that, as I say, you take politics back a couple of decades, well, you wouldn't have done.
But the data's all on the internet now, more or less. You don't really need FOIs for it, because I knew even I knew the public finances were pretty terrible, and I didn't even have to go to first-hand sources. The Spectator was saying it for ages. What's it called? Christopher Snowden of the IEA. He did a great Substack that was titled "Liz Truss didn't crash the economy; it was already crashed when she got there, or break it." Sorry. And it's true. We've basically been trying to push a stone up a hill with the economy, with fake growth, whatever. Even before the crash, like from about the mid-2000s, it was all based on debt. And it's all been based on debt since. Over 100% of GDP's debt. We only ever had that in history in wartime. There's no war, and not only that, nothing works. Where's it all going?
Well, it's mainly going on social care, pensions, and the NHS. That's basically where it's going. With that said, though, I mean, it is a very tricky one. This in terms of, as you say, pushing a stone up a hill. Well, anyone gets it. You don't exactly know how to deal with it. It's all basically knackered, and so this is one of the reasons why we then get out of the very online right. We get this meme of the Uniparty, because it genuinely does seem not to matter which one of them's in. The same kinds of measure. With that said, I don't think the Conservative Party would have implemented for example, the national insurance hike for employers. I don't think they would have done that.
I would have said the same thing about the energy price cap, but May still implemented that. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't be so sure.
Just talking with May, right?
Yeah.
When people started to try and do something sensible,
Dementia
and
tax.
I'm talking about what Labour successfully branded as the dementia tax.
Yeah.
Right. So all that stuff about saying, look, okay, you're going to need to release some assets from your estate in order to pay for your own care and elder, which is actually quite a sensible policy in lots of ways, and got shot down in exactly the same way that there were some, not all, but some of the policies that Liz Truss put forward that are actually quite sensible, and they got shot down. Yeah. So there's an argument here for saying, why do we have a Uniparty as such, and why do we have the fact that you try and actually get anything done, you will be shot down in one way, shape, or form? Well, that is because you try and get anything sensible done, you're going to end up in a position where the carpet is pulled out from beneath you, and one moment you're out of the office, the next moment you're out of office. That's another Yes Minister line that I like quite a lot. It's a bit like when Priti Patel, this goes back to 20 something or other, 15, 16, 17, something like that. When she went over to Israel and had a lot of meetings.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
That bit, you remember that bit? And
I
then
remember that.
And I remember actually watching some comedy shows at the time, political satire shows at the time, and like everyone was watching the flight. You know how you can track the flight on, is how much trouble this person's in. You know why she's been thrown back.
She's done.
She's gonna get sacked. She's gonna get sacked. So that was.
I mean, I suppose this is why it's a really interesting time for politics, because if trends stay as they are now, reform gets in, and we have literally no idea who's official opposition. It could be the Greens. I don't think it will be the Greens, but I think I'd personally put my money on the Lib Dems just because it's funny. But it's more likely going to be Labour. I think Tories will be third or fourth or fifth, to be honest. But even when it comes to that, they don't have the power that they would have had, obviously, between when you had the Uniparty. Because at the end of the day, I'm very much with Peter Hitchens. They were basically both keeping each other up, and I think even Neil Kinnock admitted that recently in an interview. He doesn't want the Tory party to die because basically Labour rely on it, and Labour quite clearly don't know what to do about reform because, when they actually do have right-wing rhetoric, it's a bit like Trump. They might actually do it. Operation Restoring Justice, getting rid of all the green stuff, etc., etc. Whereas obviously you got Boris Johnson. Everyone thought he was a libertarian, and turns out he's made the biggest nanny state ever, which is quite interesting.
You're quite right to refer to that interview with Neil Kinnock. What I think, actually, I don't dislike the man, I must admit. I think he's a good man. Not on the same side of politics as I am, but never mind. I've always said to people, if there were no such thing as disagreement, then there would be no such thing as politics, now would there? And for those of us who make our living off that, well, we kind of need that now, don't we? So, but anyway, but yes, he did say that, and I think in all of his experience, remember, he fought 2 elections and lost both of them, but still, he's had a lot of experience in this system, and I think the point that what is underneath the point that he was trying to make is that, yes, the 2 parties, when we talk or the Uniparty, if that's how you want to refer to it, let's stick with 2.
Yeah.
They're symbiotic. They really are.
Yep.
Both of them need the other. And just as you were saying earlier, they, you know, you get these kind of random insurgencies, and nobody really knows what to do about it. You know, the honest answer is the main job of the Tory party is to keep Labour out of power.
From I think
You know,
we've said this before, since World War One. Before that, it was the Liberal Party. But yes,
well,
it's
indeed, but whatever various
yeah,
things have morphed into, yes. Whereas the main job of the Labour Party is to keep the Tories out of power.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know, so and the thing is, if you spend some time going down to somewhere like Southside for Labour or CCHQ for actually I don't know if Labour is still in Southside, but anyway, CCHQ former Matthew Parker Street in Westy. Um, both of them are central offices. Their job is to win elections,
yeah,
right? It's not really to formulate policy. It's not really to train up candidates. They have some involvement in selection, and in fact, some people would argue too much involvement in selection. But the reality, the overall overarching ambition is to win. In fact, it's the only point in them. You know, that is what they're there for, because their point is to keep the other lot out. Now, what the hell you do when you actually get in is not really within their purview. And I will just make another point. Just this isn't really political. It's like people don't seem to realise what the main job of the MOD is. And I say this as someone who's worked for a firm that supplies into them, gone through the security clearance, all of that kind of thing. Without saying too much, what I can say is that the MOD's main job is security, and they are very good at it. Very, very, very good at it. And if there was more I could say, I would, but I can't. What I will say is that is actually, you know, people think, well, what's the Ministry of Defence's job? Oh, it's to fight wars and defend the country and all of that.
well,
No, their main job is making sure that nobody knows too much about anything. That is literally their main job. You know, and just as I say, while on the face of it, CCHQ and Labour HQ, you know, that might be to formulate policy, organise the party. No, it isn't. Their main job is to keep the other lot out of power. That's it.
yeah. Well, it says oh, I can't remember who says it. It might even be Curtis Yarvin, who I'm not a fan of, but he is right when he says the point of a system is what it does, or its results even. Or he might have quoted that off someone else. I can't remember, but yeah. I mean, what does the MOD do? Yeah, it keeps secrets effectively, and then on the odd occasion fights a war. But we haven't had that in a while, thankfully. But even then, you know, you MOD go over and help out Ukraine in some ways. They help out Israel as well in some ways with reconnaissance and things like that, and I guess supplying them. I don't know if MOD necessarily handles the supplies, but yeah. And as you say, what's the point of the Tories and Labour? Well, apart from maybe a blip in the 80s and a bit of the 90s where they actually did have a coherent ideology to some extent with the Tories, yeah, just keep Labour out. Why did Cameron say he's the heir to Blair? Why did May want to get rid of the whole Nasty Party brand that they had at the time? Simple reason. It helps you win elections. Listen to voters. What are they saying about you? Right, how do we turn that into a good thing? Or maybe we should just stop doing the things they don't like. But that's the thing with the public; they're unpredictable. So it's
Well, the thing is, I would argue actually on that point that how shall I word this? The more predictable the public are to you, the more likely you will see electoral success.
yes.
It's
Okay.
when you've decided that the public is completely is sort of lawless and unpredictable, and God knows what they're going to do. You know, when you basically essentially means you haven't got your finger on the pulse.
Yeah. Wait,
And that's what it means. And it is your fault. It's your problem. It's no one else's. That's down to you. If you've not got your finger on the pulse, who else are you going to blame? The electorate.
well, that's the funny thing, isn't it? Because the polls have kind of stabilised. Well, they have for Reform, I should point out. Reform is stable at around 30 31%, something like that. That is stable and predictable. Everyone else are all over the place in the polls, and I guess this is a problem. It's five-party politics. It's like, well, sort of, but it's one party versus four. And, we know Plaid and Labour are happy to work with each other. There's even been some Labour and Tories saying, yes, we will work with each other if it helps keep Nigel Farage out. It's Dominic Cummings has a lot of good things to say on this, but unfortunately he's got the same thing to say over and over again. So you can't really learn anything new from recent interviews he's done. But I guess this is what's happened. What do you do when we can't keep each other out? Well, we work together. My enemy is my friend, and we keep the person who's trying to kick the whole thing down out. And to be honest with you, if the Tories do end up just effectively poaching Reform's policy platform, I don't really have an issue with that. As long as it all gets implemented. I'm not a party man, I'm a cause man, as Gawain Towler says. But I just cannot see the Tories doing that at all. A lot of them are still iffy about Robert Jenrick and Katie Lamb, and that seems to be the best hope that anyone on the right of the Tory party have at the moment. But even then, I know people that are going off them a bit just because they don't seem to be going anywhere. But that's not necessarily going to stay the case forever.
Well, the trouble really also is that when you get to this degree of stubbornness, and that much also can be said of Reform, that there is the stubbornness here just saying we want the Tories destroyed, which is kind of like it's a vendetta, and
which I'm on board with, by the way. I will.
Well, you might well be, but
I know
vendettas don't win elections.
Yes, I know it's short-sighted.
Well, it's not about being short-sighted. It's about saying that the public has a lot more nous than people think it does, and this is something that wolves are always quite keen to remind people of, because people do need a reminder, that they're not stupid. And that people can actually see what's going on here. You look at all the whole typical, it was not mean, is it? The whole kind of trope of divided parties don't win elections. That doesn't matter whether you're talking about the Tories or Labour or anyone else for that matter. And now we have the same thing. There has been infighting within Reform. So what it's going to come down to is, come the next election, whenever that may be, can people find distinct positions that differentiate them from whoever the other lot are? Or, as an insurgent party like Reform, something that's different from either of them? Or any of the others? That's what it's going to come down to.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I think Reform have a bit of an advantage there, because you've obviously seen Katie Lamb and Robert Jenrick trying to effectively riff off Reform, rip them off. Yes, we'll deport people who have been on ILR for too long. Just because you're here and got ILR in the past doesn't mean you should stay here. See, there were some people in the Tory party who complained to the whips about her. That was always going to happen, so is that even going to work out? And this is the problem the Tories have. If they do copy Reform's manifesto word for word, barely anyone will believe them, and I don't think it will affect their polling too much. I mean, look at post-conference. Every poll I saw, they actually went down post-conference. I think people are just apathetic to them, and the votes they're getting now were either people who were devoted Tories, basically stay with them because it's a social club, like Emily Hewitson, let's say, and obviously Edwina Curry maybe as well, or it's basically pensioners that aren't paying attention and just always voted Tory. There'll be wider groups than that, obviously, but that seems to be the main two that I'm seeing.
Well, it's the worst thing to be in politics. It's not unpopular; it's irrelevant. And that is where they risk heading if they're not careful. The Tories, that is. With that said, in fact, they're in a worse position in lots of ways to where Labour is, because Labour isn't at risk of going anywhere. As in going down the drain. They're not.
No. Do you not think so?
No, I seriously don't. They might have what has been widely cited as the most unpopular prime minister in history, and they had a very thin, broad but thin voter base to win the last election.
Hmm.
Do I think the Labour Party is going anywhere? No, I don't think they're going anywhere. There is a broader question at the moment because Labour does not have a credible challenger to their left, whereas the Tories do have a credible challenger to their right. Okay, if
Yeah.
anyone is at risk of going anywhere, it's the Tories. So I don't think we're going to end up with the Labour Party disappearing. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, in recent news, I can report
Go on.
briefly. Yep. So we have various factions on the really quite far to the left lot, and some of those are called the Socialist Labour Network, some of them are called the Democratic Socialist Network, some of them are called the Campaign for a Mass Workers' Party. Now, in the past week or couple of weeks, they have held various meetings, of which I have cognizance. They're all trying to find ways of stuffing their own policy agendas into the nascent entity that is now your party. Now, the history of this is that the Labour in Exile Network, which is basically all the people who kicked out of Labour by Starmer for being too left wing, there was also LAW, Labour Against the Witch Hunts people, and they sort of ended up merging into the Socialist Labour Network. Then there was an internal struggle between the people who thought it was worth forming a new party, versus the people who thought it wasn't worth doing that and they needed to organize in different ways. I mean, God knows how. What happened was that the people who did favor, on their steering committee, the people who did favor forming a new party won. Pretty much all of the others who did not favor that then resigned en masse from that steering committee. Since then, that movement has evolved such that, I mean, because they've been trying to move towards forming a new party.
Right.
Now, listen, so what's happened since then is that now this new thing has come along, your party, yeah, by Corbyn and Sultana, apparently interchangeably, but there we are. So now their focus is on trying to influence that, because basically somebody's done the actual setting up of a new party thing for them, which I think was one of their major stumbling blocks before. Okay, so somebody's done that, and now what they're doing is trying to influence that by getting into it and putting policy motions forward and putting, all that kind of thing. Somebody's done the bit that they could never do, right?
Right, and now
so
it's
now, yes, it is. So now it's all for them. It's all about how they can sort of bring that under their control and that sort of thing. That. With that said, being the kinds of people they're going to end up. They do like a bit of. I mean, you only have to watch Les Miserables. It's glorious defeat.
People sing,
Yeah, glorious defeat.
Sung that all the time at choir at school. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. They're all. Are you a baritone, by the way? I guess you are.
I was actually a bass.
Were you a bass?
I was a bass.
I was a baritone. I was a baritone. Anyway, there we are. But my point being, that they like a bit of glorious defeat, and they always kind of live for it in some way. So I have no idea, based on my current political intel, what is actually going to happen with this. But what I will note is that, like I said, Wolves has covered stories on this for years, that they might try and form their own party, and in the end, despite various factions falling against and whatever, they never did. But now a new party has been formed for them by someone else. So now the strategy has shifted towards, let's try and infiltrate this.
Which,
it'll be very interesting what happens next.
Well, it will be, because one of the 6 MPs that they have, well, two of them, arguably only one of them is progressive. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, is just lazy. But obviously, you have four quite socially conservative Muslim MPs who have all been quite happy to ban a Jewish team, Israeli team, I should say, from going to Aston Villa, which, by the way, happens to neighbour Handsworth, which obviously Robert Jenrick was caught saying is a bit of a slum and he didn't see a white face. They're not very well integrated. Well, it turns out the place next to it didn't want any Israelis there. I won't touch on that anymore. And then since then, they've all gone a bit mask off and said, now that we've done this, the old Lenin line of you find mush, you keep pushing. Now we need to ban every type of Israeli team coming in. It's not. It's good that we got the fans away, but now it's the rest of them. But obviously, the left wing are all on the pro-Gaza march, so they're kind of on board with that because Israel bad. But then, what do you do about their opinions on, say, renters' rights? Because they're all landlords. So I don't know what they're going to do about that. Obviously, they've got socially conservative views on gay people, gay marriage, women, I imagine, as well. But obviously, they've kept that somewhat. They just don't see a need to talk about that, I suppose. So it's interesting to see how these social progressive / communists are going to deal with that, because it's inevitably going to happen. And it's the same thing with the Greens. You got Zach Polanski heading it, followed by I think it was a councillor from Hares Hill, who, when he won, obviously the first thing he said was Allahu Akbar, Gaza will be free, whatever. And it's... I don't really understand how this alliance carries on. I also don't understand why it's so split, because they all seem to say the same thing. So those differences there, I think, might need explaining, but then it might be the same thing over on the right here, where it's, why has Ben Habib made his own party when, reform was there? It might be a personal thing for all I know. So I don't know if you.
Well, I mean, you've made two very important points there. The first is that often personalities a lot. Well, no, it's not the right word. Egos.
Sure. Yeah.
Do sometimes overtake priorities in terms of both policy and agenda and actually actions that are undertaken. That is very true. You've also got the fact that a lot of the policy aims, how shall I put this? I'm sorry, I'm just thinking out loud right now, but I guess for a lot of people, in fact, I would go so far as to say for most people, policy aims, when viewed in isolation, work for your agenda, right? If you attempt to aggregate them into some sort of actual, coherent vision, many of them are in contradiction with one another. With that said, and I would say that for both the Tories and Labour, and if the Lib Dems or the Greens or Reform indeed, perhaps in particular, were to get into power, what you find is that when your political strategy, including your messaging, of course, is very important, focuses on individual areas of policy which can stand on their own as arguments in respect of of themselves, but nothing else, right? When they exist in isolation, that can work, right? When you start trying to mesh them all together because, oh my God, we just got into power, right? And now we've got to try and actually integrate all of these things together, you end up with a goddamn mishmash of things that don't actually agree, people who don't agree with each other, various different agendas that don't agree with one another. And then, if you want my short form political analysis, we get the current Labour government, because that's what we've got at the moment. We've got lots of different wings. We've got the trade union wings. We've got the sort of blue Labour, sort of vaguely centre-rightish element of that party. we've got the far left element of it, we've got the centrist element of it, and the reality is individual policy goals, well, you can put those forward. The true test of governance is what happens when you try to say, okay, I like this, but I also like that, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. But the trouble is that this actually conflicts with that.
Well, you have to prioritize then, and that's not necessarily easy.
Well, you're very right. You're
Yeah.
very right to say that, because what I would say is that the art of governance is prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get into power, what you find is there is no such thing as something that is unimportant. Everything is important. Education, healthcare, transport, business, tax. Yeah, I'm not going to go any further, right?
Climate change.
Yeah, oh well. It's all important. It's all important.
Yeah.
But the point is to govern is to prioritize. It is to decide what is more important than what else. And what people, we've just finished, what people don't realize is that when you decide what is more important than what else, you are not deciding that what else is not important, i.e., at all. You are saying it is not, Y is not actually as important as X. That is basically what governance is. And when you're a cabinet minister, the decisions you're presented with basically amount to that. There are very few cabinet ministers, or even shadow cabinet ministers, who come up with their own ideas. Basically, the method of governance is being presented with options, saying which one of these do you think is more important than the other? Because that's the civil services job. That's what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not changed for decades. Okay, I'm not saying there are no cabinet ministers who have actually, come up with their own ideas. I'm not saying that's true. Michael Gove, actually, love him or hate him, is a very good example of someone who had his own ideas and had the devil of a job getting them through with mixed results, like any minister. But the point really here is to say that governance, the art of it, and the skill of it, is prioritization. What is more important than what else? You don't actually say anything is unimportant. You just say that some things are more important than other things, and that's what being in charge gives you the privilege of deciding.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people argue the priorities have been absolutely skew with for decades. I mean, an interesting point on prioritising, actually, I think this comes from Jordan Peterson when he was, I think he was working on a climate change committee in the UN. I don't know why a clinical psychologist was working in that, but apparently he did work there. Apparently, the UN Climate Change Committee had something crazy like 450 high priorities. And Jordan Peterson always makes the point of if you have like over 50 priorities, let alone 400 odd, you actually don't have any priorities. It's just chaos. Like you obviously need to say what's more important than the other. Otherwise, as you said before, things are going to conflict and everything just grinds to a halt if everything matters exactly the same as everything else. So it's, I mean, I don't think that's been an issue with our government necessarily, but we certainly have been prioritising the wrong thing anyway. So it's not just a case of what do you prioritise, it's also, well, some people, there are clearly enough people that it's got to the UN who think, oh, you just prioritise everything, get everything done. Sorry, we live in the real world. There's limited time, resources, etc., etc. So,
well, but perhaps you have, in fact, effectively contradicted yourself there. You say you don't know why he was there. Perhaps that's exactly why he was there.
Yeah, maybe.
To make exactly that point. I'm not his biggest fan in some areas of the work that he's done, but at the same time, he does say some perfectly sensible things, and I think that it sounds like one of them. What he said is, from a psychological perspective, it also affects bureaucracy. if you're going to try and prioritize everything, oh my God, look at the EU, look at the UN, look at the sort of, we're trying to prioritize everything. So we need a task force for this, we need a team for that, we need a department for the other, we need all these things so that we can look like we're addressing everything. Because what we're not recognizing, though, is that we actually can address only so many things at once.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where it comes down to. When we look at the rationales put forward by people like Dominic Cummings, like Boris Johnson, I mean, how on earth did they actually get that withdrawal agreement for Brexit over the line? How did they get it done? Because priorities were decided upon, and various other things had to go by the wayside, because there was no other way that was going to happen. You were not going to be able to try and keep everybody happy all of the time, and this is what ultimately led to the downfall of Theresa May. Because I don't know if you've met her, she's a lovely lady.
She seems really nice, yeah.
She's a very nice lady. I mean, everyone always goes, "Oh, Vicar's daughter," but never mind Vicar's daughter. Let's look at the person, not her provenance. Let's actually look at the person. She's a lovely lady. But ultimately, the EU, Juncker, and etc. It's been reported since, that they always knew she was never going to go for no deal. Because she would have had to brass far too many people off in order to do so, and she's too nice. But I do recall, I'm sorry, I can't remember the news source for this one, but when it first came out, it's been reported that when Boris got in, that the impression on the other side of the channel was, well, that they thought, somebody said, I can't remember who, but a senior source apparently said, we just never knew he might actually be crazy enough to do it. As in no deal.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, I remember that story.
Yeah, and they never got that impression from Theresa May.
Well,
but they did get it from him.
Yeah, well, it's part of the reason that Trump's so successful. I mean, people thought, oh, he might be crazy enough to do the tariff thing, and then he was. Yeah. And
in his last presidency, you had the whole thing with North Korea.
Yeah.
It was like the Rocket Man thing, But the thing is, sometimes, and we can have arguments about whether or not that should be successful as a tactic, but actually sometimes it does work. And
Nixon was famous for it as well. Yeah.
I personally think that Theresa May would have been an excellent prime minister in different times.
I think a lot of people seem to say if Boris Johnson and Theresa May kind of swapped their timelines, so Boris first, then Theresa May, that probably would have been a lot better. And I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we have to do in politics, and I'm gonna, just sort of go on a mad one on this one, but it's like, we the space in which we exist is one in which everybody seems to be almost contractually obliged to hate one another. But the reality is, the best thing we can do in politics is to appreciate all of the young. I'm trying not to sound like, Mother Teresa here. I really, not that Teresa, different Teresa. But But no. Seriously, we have to start realizing that, as I've said for a long time, we are what we learn, and we learn what we live, and what we live becomes our politics. And that then also becomes what we bring to politics. And when we look at other people's, including people as diverse, I think, from either you or me, as someone like Zach Polanski, we have to look at, well, where's his life brought him? And why has it? And how has it? If you want to actually take a look at why people go into politics and why they bring with them the politics that they do, the reality is that they bring with them the lives that they've had. And if you're willing to start from first principles there, then, you can start
understanding them, which then leaves you with two choices. Either use that to work with them constructively and collaboratively, or use your understanding of them to embrace your Machiavellian side and bring them down by exploiting their own weaknesses because you now understand them a lot better.
I thought that was going to be a very melancholy way to end, but I think instead we've got a bit of the nasty side out as well. But politics is nasty. Seen it plenty of times. Boris Johnson clearly is still not very happy with Rishi Sunak, for example, and I think that's putting it incredibly politely. So,
Well, what it shows you is that it is the human condition,
yes,
and that it is your choice to use that
Mm.
however you want to do it. And that is the lesson I would say for, especially in the moment, there will be lots of people in positions, largely in the reform area of things, that may be standing or looking at standing as prospective parliamentary candidates. And I would leave that message for all of them, especially if some of them are going to be governing us within a few years. That is the message I would leave for them. It is up to you how you choose to use the way that your life has shaped you to then shape your politics and how you choose to govern.
Well, there we go. Well, I think I'll leave it on that note. So thank you very much for joining us, Patrick.
Thank you too, sir.
Right. I think with that, that's all we had for you for today. So once again, thank you all very much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.